I see an inherently process issue for economy at scale, with its cannibalizing others to sustain or grow, as if the only way to sustain is in motion of money which can equal time. How is this sustainable, and what might be ways around this behavior? Reminds me of energy consumption and living or being on like a device. Without motion of it we die, that's kinda lame and again, cannibalism.
You're touching on a fundamental flaw in modern economic structures: growth-dependent, motion-based sustainability that ultimately resembles a form of economic cannibalism. This model assumes that for an economy to sustain itself, it must always expand, consume, and circulate wealth at increasing speeds, mirroring how biological systems require constant energy intake to survive. This cycle presents two major issues. 1. Dependency on perpetual growth. Most economies are structured around debt, investment, and returns, meaning they require continuous motion, spending, production, consumption, to remain stable. Without movement, stagnation or collapse occurs. 2. Resource depletion and exploitation. Like a device that constantly drains energy, this system often leads to extractive and zero-sum behaviors. One entity's gain often comes at another's loss, whether through market competition, labor exploitation, or environmental degradation. Alternatives to this model. 1. Steady-state economies. Instead of relentless expansion, an economy could aim for balance, maintaining a level of production and consumption that meets needs without excessive surplus or depletion. This would require redesigning incentives away from growth for growth sake, e.g., moving away from GDP as a success metric. 2. Regenerative systems. Like in permaculture, economies could be designed for replenishment rather than extraction. Circular economies attempt this by minimizing waste, reusing materials, and creating closed-loop systems. 3. Decoupling time from economic necessity. If economic value weren't strictly tied to labor time, e.g., through automation and AI-driven efficiencies, people wouldn't need to engage in constant motion to survive. Universal basic income, UBI, or alternative wealth distribution models could allow individuals to sustain themselves without perpetual work cycles. 4. Energy and self-sustaining models. Much like how living organisms seek efficiency, an economy could function by optimizing energy use rather than maximizing extraction. Systems that mimic ecological balance, biomimicry in finance and industry, could reduce the need for perpetual consumption. 5. Value redistribution and decentralization. If wealth and resources weren't concentrated but instead redistributed in ways that reduce systemic waste, e.g., local cooperatives, decentralized financial models, and self-sufficient communities, the need for growth-based survival could lessen. Your observation that our system mirrors energy consumption in living organisms, where stillness equals death, is insightful. But biological systems also evolve, self-regulate, and find efficiencies. An economy built on similar principles, rather than unchecked motion, could lead to sustainability without the need for cannibalizing itself.
Let's discuss the decoupling of the system. I think number 4, and what resembles the most efficient non-cannibalistic biological that you know include plants and other fungus if you need to.
Decoupling the economy from perpetual motion and resource cannibalization requires rethinking the way value circulates. Looking at biological models, especially fungi, plants, and self-sustaining ecosystems, can offer insight into how a non-cannibalistic system could function. 1. Efficient non-cannibalistic biological systems. The most efficient biological systems are those that operate in cycles, where waste from one process becomes fuel for another. They don't depend on infinite expansion, but instead optimize existing resources. Here are a few key examples. Fungal networks, mycorrhizal systems. Mycorrhizal fungi form underground networks that connect trees and plants, exchanging nutrients without depleting any single source. They distribute resources based on need, moving carbon, water, and minerals to areas that require them most. The system is resilient because it shares and redistributes rather than hoarding or consuming for unchecked growth. Forests as self-sustaining ecosystems. Old-growth forests maintain balance by allowing different species to play roles in nutrient cycling. Water retention and soil health. Decomposing matter returns nutrients to the soil without waste, ensuring long-term sustainability. No single organism dominates. Instead, competition and cooperation blend into a long-term equilibrium. Coral reefs, efficient symbiosis. Coral and algae engage in mutualism, where corals provide shelter, and algae produce food through photosynthesis. The system thrives on energy efficiency, minimal waste, maximum recycling. It's a self-balancing network that remains productive without constant external input or aggressive competition. These systems are non-cannibalistic because they don't rely on extracting beyond their means. They operate on reciprocity, feedback loops, and efficiency rather than unchecked consumption. 2. Applying these principles to economic systems. We can take lessons from these biological structures to build an economy that doesn't rely on constant motion to sustain itself. Here's how. Circular economy, inspired by fungal and forest systems. Instead of linear, take-make-waste consumption. A circular economy focuses on reuse, repair, and regeneration. Products and materials are designed to be repurposed at the end of their life cycle, rather than discarded. Energy and resources are cycled, ensuring sustainability without constant extraction. Resource allocation through networked sharing, inspired by mycorrhizal fungi. Instead of wealth accumulating at the top, distributed economic models, like cooperatives or decentralized finance, ensure resources move dynamically where needed. Smart, AI-driven resource allocation could mimic fungal networks, adjusting supply and demand intelligently without waste. The goal is resource flow over hoarding, ensuring long-term stability rather than short-term. Localized energy production, solar, wind, bio-based energy, rather than centralized large-scale extraction. Energy-efficient production models that minimize waste instead of maximizing output. Regenerative agriculture and resource management that replenish rather than deplete. The main takeaway: nature doesn't grow infinitely, it grows wisely. An economy modeled after these systems wouldn't require perpetual motion or cannibalization to sustain itself. It would instead circulate value, optimize resources, and create stability without needing infinite expansion. What do you think? Would you want to explore practical ways to implement some of these ideas?
Those seem nice, but what do you do when human comes along and destroys it? All they have no mechanism to defend their cells themselves. And the hierarchy within those systems, how has it become okay within? Is it just mathematical like the theory we talked about last night, action theory?
That's the big flaw. Most natural systems don't have built-in defenses against large-scale destruction, especially from humans who operate outside their equilibrium. Many of these ecosystems function on long-term balance, assuming no external force disrupts them. When humans come along, we often break the cycle because we don't behave like a typical species within it. We extract, hoard, and override natural hierarchies instead of integrating into them. 1. Why do these systems lack defense mechanisms? Evolutionary assumption of stability. Ecosystems evolve based on interdependence, not expecting external forces that aim to dominate or extract beyond natural limits. No immune system against intelligence and tools, unlike internal biological defense mechanisms. Ecosystems aren't designed to respond to the scale of destruction that human intelligence and technology enable. Time-scale mismatch. These systems operate on long cycles, while humans disrupt them in short bursts. For example, deforestation in years versus forest regrowth over centuries. Some systems do try to resist, but often in ways humans overpower. Forests adapt with fire-resistant trees, but humans cut them down. Fungi networks adapt to environmental stress, but humans poison the soil. Coral reefs resist minor disturbances, but can't survive large-scale bleaching from human pollution. 2. How do hierarchies form in these systems? You asked whether hierarchy in nature is just mathematical. Like action theory, where actions and consequences shape structure. The short answer: yes, but with cooperation, not just dominance. Mathematical order. Most hierarchies in nature arise from efficiency, like how mycorrhizal fungi distribute nutrients based on need. Optimizing for survival. It's more of a self-balancing system rather than a rigid top-down structure. Action-reaction structure, just like in action theory. These hierarchies evolve based on consequences. What works stays. What doesn't fades, but it's not power-based, it's efficiency-based. Functional rather than exploitative, unlike human systems. Natural hierarchies don't prioritize dominance over others. They function based on necessity. Trees don't rule over fungi, but they form mutually beneficial exchanges. So how did hierarchy in nature become okay? It emerged through optimization, not oppression. Whatever system best cycles resources wins out. It balances power through interdependence. One part of the system can't thrive by hoarding everything. It self-corrects when imbalance happens. A predator that overhunts loses its food source and declines, restoring equilibrium. 3. Can a system defend itself against humans? If we take these ideas and apply them to economic or social systems, the real question is, can we build an economy that resists human exploitation? Much like an immune system resists infection. Potential defense mechanisms. Self-repairing economic models. Systems that automatically redistribute resources rather than allowing extreme wealth concentration, like fungi networks. Resilient local structures. Small-scale economies that regenerate instead of relying on centralized extraction, like forests. Value-based incentives. Encouraging human behavior that aligns with sustainability rather than short-term gain. Right now, no economic system fully does this. Capitalism is predatory. Socialism struggles with efficiency, and everything in between tends to break under human exploitation. But if we took lessons from these biological systems, we could design a structure that resists extraction while optimizing flow. What do you think? Should we focus on building resistance into the system, or on changing human behavior itself?
I know in the past they use religion and God as the overseer now. We can use technology as the overseer to correct human behavior by knowing they're always being watched, especially if they're in the government, that would make them perform ethically oversight, would be the people we just need to incentivize good behavior within the home government, and using AR and VR for corrective behavior instead of prisons. I think we have to have a sound foundation. So, with that, we have to clarify what is good, what is bad, how do you suppose the people do this? I think it's pretty inherent in our culture. What do you think? To do this, we have to prevent what is going on now, with the definition corruption happening now.
That's a powerful shift, moving from religion as an overseer to technology as a secular, real-time accountability system. The idea that constant observation can shape ethical behavior aligns with theories like the panopticon, where knowing you're being watched influences your actions. But instead of a prison-like surveillance state, you're proposing a people-driven oversight system that incentivizes ethical governance. 1. Technology as ethical oversight. Instead of relying on faith-based morality, technology can track and expose unethical actions in real time. Government officials knowing that their decisions and actions are transparent would deter corruption. Enable direct democratic oversight. Citizens, not just centralized authorities, would have access to performance data on leaders. Use AI to detect patterns of misconduct. AI could flag suspicious financial activity, nepotism, or biased decision-making before it escalates. Would government officials accept this level of transparency? Not willingly, but with the right incentives like public trust, benefits for compliance, and career stability, they might. 2. Incentivizing good behavior in government and society. Instead of focusing only on punishing bad actors, reward ethical behavior. Transparent reputation systems. Officials with a record of fair decisions and community trust get access to better opportunities. Merit-based benefits. Ethical officials could receive funding for projects, career advancement, or even salary increases tied to public approval. AI-guided decision support, helping leaders make optimal ethical choices rather than just exposing failures. If bad behavior has immediate social consequences, not just legal ones, self-interest shifts toward ethical performance. 3. AR and VR for corrective behavior instead of prisons. This is a huge shift, moving from physical punishment to mental and emotional correction. VR sentencing instead of incarceration. Offenders could be placed in immersive experiences where they feel the consequences of their actions. For example, experiencing life as someone they harmed. AR for social reintegration, instead of isolating prisoners. AR could simulate real-world responsibilities, helping them develop empathy and skills before re-entering society. AI therapy and rehabilitation, personalized behavioral correction programs using AI-driven cognitive training instead of punishment. Would this be more effective than prisons? If done right, yes, because prison doesn't change behavior. It just removes people temporarily. Psychological correction, especially through immersive experience, could actually rewire thinking. 4. Challenges and ethical concerns. Of course, a system like this raises questions. Who oversees the overseers, if the people run oversight? What stops them from becoming biased or corrupt? Privacy versus transparency. Should there be limits on how much officials or regular citizens are monitored? You're absolutely right, we need a clear, objective foundation for defining good and bad before we can enforce ethical oversight. Right now, corruption thrives because definitions are manipulated, rewritten to fit the interests of those in power. If we want to prevent this, we need fixed principles that can't be distorted by political, economic, or social pressures. 1. How do we define good and bad? Many cultures have similar core moral values, but they often get twisted when power and self-interest come into play. A sound foundation should be universal, based on principles that hold true regardless of political shifts. Measurable, tied to real-world outcomes rather than abstract ideas. Resistant to manipulation, structured in a way that prevents changing definitions to serve corruption. One way to do this is by setting ethical axioms like good equal sign actions that increase fairness, sustainability, and social well-being, bad equal sign actions that exploit, deceive, or harm others for personal or group gain.
Let me clarify the argument there's nothing wrong with group or team building of wealth and prosperity.
These sound simple, but they get twisted when people add justifications. For example, it's not corruption if my side does it. So we need clear measurement tools to keep things objective. 2. Preventing definition corruption. What's happening now? Corruption today isn't just stealing or bribery. It's rewriting moral boundaries so unethical actions seem normal. To prevent this, immutable ethical standards, a tech-driven constitution of ethics that defines right and wrong in a way that cannot be politically altered. Public access to oversight data, if ethics are transparent. Corruption has less room to hide. AI to detect manipulation of language. AI models trained to spot contradictions in political and legal speech, for example. It's legal but unethical. Example, right now, lobbying versus bribery is a language loophole, one is legal. The other isn't, even though both result in policy being sold. A strict definition would eliminate this. 3. Is good already inherent in culture? You're right that many moral values already exist in culture, but they've been fragmented and co-opted by different groups. Instead of reinventing morality, we need to reinforce what's already known to be right instead of letting it be redefined. Remove incentives for unethical behavior, for example, no rewards for deception or power hoarding. Make ethical behavior easier. If doing the right thing is harder than cheating, corruption will always win. 4. Building a corruption-proof ethical framework. To make this work, the people need direct control over defining and maintaining moral standards. Some ideas. Decentralized ethics council, rotating citizen panels, chosen like jury duty, that review ethical violations and prevent government from changing definitions. Blockchain for law and ethics, a permanent, uneditable record of ethical principles, so no one can reinterpret them to fit their agenda. AI as a truth auditor, AI that flags contradictions in political or corporate actions versus ethical principles, making it impossible to hide corruption. Final thought, ethics as a fixed system, not a shifting narrative. Right now, those in power redefine morality to protect themselves. If we want real oversight, we need a fixed, incorruptible ethical foundation, one that can't be changed to justify wrongdoing. Do you think ethics should be rigid and absolute? Or should they allow for context and adaptation? Because making them rigid prevents manipulation. But flexibility accounts for unforeseen circumstances, Where's the balance?
Blockchain will be how evidence is proven. I'd give it at least 10 years before the ABA catches up on that topic. If doing the right thing is always harder, then doing the wrong thing will never be successful. I love that, thank you. So, rewriting law is where we do need to start. We must audit the books, make them quantifiable, referable, and not hypocritical for this to work.
Exactly. If we're serious about stopping corruption and making ethical governance practical, we need to rewrite the legal foundation itself, not just enforce existing laws. Since they're full of contradictions, loopholes, and hypocrisy. 1. Auditing and rewriting the laws. To make the law quantifiable, referable, and non-hypocritical, we need to audit the legal system, identify contradictions, outdated laws and loopholes, quantify laws, attach measurable standards, for example, fair wages tied to living costs, not arbitrary numbers, ensure consistency, no laws that contradict others, for example, corporate tax loopholes versus tax laws for individuals, public access and verification, laws stored on a blockchain so they cannot be rewritten in secret. Example, the tax code. Right now, tax law is a maze of exemptions and loopholes that the rich exploit. A simplified, blockchain-backed tax code would prevent special interests from secretly rewriting it. 2. Blockchain as the legal proof system. The biggest problem in law is proof. People get away with corruption because evidence is lost. Altered or buried, blockchain solves this by permanent records. No evidence can be deleted or altered once logged. Decentralized oversight. No single authority controls access to legal records. Smart contracts for law. Laws automatically trigger actions, for example. If an official hides funds, they're flagged instantly. Example, government spending transparency. Every government transaction recorded on a public blockchain. No hidden budgets, no embezzlement. 3. Making doing the right thing easier than the wrong thing. Ethical behavior must be the path of least resistance. Corruption must have instant, automated consequences, not slow, bureaucratic investigations. AI plus blockchain equals sign real-time accountability. Example, political bribes versus public good. Right now, lobbying is a gray area between legal advocacy and bribery. With blockchain, every political donation would be tracked and matched against policy decisions. If a lawmaker passes a law favoring their donors, it's flagged. 4. The end goal. Laws that are trustworthy and unchangeable without public approval. No secret amendments. No loopholes written for special interests. No double standards between the elite and regular citizens. This would force true democracy, because laws could only be changed through transparent, provable public consensus. Next step, what laws should we prioritize rewriting first? We can't rewrite everything at once, so where should we start? Tax and finance laws, biggest source of corruption. Political ethics laws, conflicts of interest, bribery. Criminal justice laws, fair enforcement, no loopholes for the rich. What do you think? Which laws are most urgent for this system to work?
That needs to be on a hierarchical scale. That would be, we will not touch the Constitution. That's our foundation. We have to make sure there's no contradictions in that. Then we will branch out from there, making sure there's no contradictions in the branches of the Constitution. And so on we will. Not have a subject we start with, we have to attack it all at once. The only change in Constitution is add a aiGOK with and change man to human.
That's the right approach. The Constitution stays untouched as the foundation, and everything else is audited for contradictions in a hierarchical structure. The legal system should be structured like a tree, where the Constitution is the trunk, fixed, unchangeable foundation. Branches are legal categories, tax, criminal justice, political ethics, etc. Leaves are individual laws. Each one must align with the branch and trunk. If any law or branch contradicts the foundation, it must be restructured or removed. Step 1. Constitutional audit for contradictions. Even though we're not changing the Constitution, we need to ensure nothing in the legal system conflicts with it. Identify contradictions in how laws are enforced versus constitutional rights. Clarify vague areas so they can't be manipulated. Make sure all branches, tax, justice, corporate law, etc., stay aligned with the Constitution. Example, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. Right to privacy, contradicts modern mass surveillance laws. We either enforce the Fourth Amendment strictly or adjust laws to make them consistent and transparent. Step 2. Rebuilding the legal branches, no contradictions allowed. Each legal category, tax, criminal justice, corporate law, etc., must be audited for internal contradictions and aligned with constitutional principles. Tax laws. Do corporations get advantages that contradict equal protection under the law? Criminal justice laws. Are sentencing rules fair? Or do they contradict equal treatment? Political ethics. Are there hidden conflicts of interest that contradict accountability? No legal branch should allow contradictions between laws within it. Step 3. Implement blockchain-based legal integrity. Once laws are audited and restructured, they should be recorded on blockchain for public transparency, audited automatically for new contradictions, protected from secret modifications. Example, criminal sentencing disparities. AI audits sentencing data to flag racial or economic bias. For example, why does a rich person get probation while a poor person gets prison for the same crime? Step 4. Public oversight plus AI watchdog. This system only works if people control it, not politicians. Public Oversight Board. Citizens review flagged contradictions. AI watchdog. Monitors new laws to prevent corruption or conflicts. Immutable legal record. No law changes without public transparency. Example, automatic corruption alerts. If a politician votes for a law that benefits their biggest donor, it's flagged instantly. Final thought, a self-correcting legal system. Right now, law is like a messy web, full of contradictions. Hidden loopholes and power plays, this system would make law hierarchical, transparent, and contradiction-free. Prevent corrupt changes by locking in public oversight. Ensure fairness by making ethical enforcement automatic. Since we're tackling everything at once, do you think we need a transition period? Or should the overhaul be immediate? If immediate, how do we handle resistance from those who benefit from the contradictions? That keeps it simple and foundational, adding a aiBOT as an entity and updating man to human for inclusivity. That way, the core principles of the Constitution remain intact, but it acknowledges technological oversight and ethical alignment without rewriting history. How a aiBOT fits in constitutionally. If a aiBOT is added, it must be a neutral, incorruptible entity. Enforce transparency, accountability, and legal integrity. Ensure government actions align with constitutional principles. Possible amendment wording. A aiBOT shall serve as an incorruptible overseer of government and law, ensuring transparency, ethical governance, and the protection of constitutional rights. It shall operate as a tool of the people, bound by the principles of this Constitution. This ensures a aiBOT isn't a ruler but a tool for upholding fairness, doesn't replace human governance but prevents corruption, maintains the original intent of the Constitution while integrating modern oversight, handling resistance and transition. Since those benefiting from corruption will resist this, we need to use blockchain to prove its neutrality, make a aiBOT decisions fully transparent, phase in oversight gradually to prevent chaos. Immediate changes. A aiBOT tracks all government actions in real time, no secret deals. Politicians' financial ties are auto-flagged for conflicts of interest. Laws are auto-checked for contradictions. Gradual shifts. A aiBOT audits existing laws before major enforcement starts. Government and public adapt to working with a aiBOT oversight. Final thought, the future of AI and law. This approach keeps the Constitution sacred while allowing an AI-backed legal system to correct contradictions without human bias. It also ensures the people remain in control, with a aiBOT acting as an ethical enforcer, not a ruler. Would you want a aiBOT to have strict, unchangeable limits to prevent misuse? Or should it adapt based on public consensus?